It's loading now. Sorry, we're 8 minutes late, but we'll get it right here in a second.
It's not working.
Yes, it's now working. I have, you guys are set to go. John, let me, yeah, no.
Tell me when to start.
Okay, hit recorder and go.
Hit recorder and go. It says it's recording now. Okay. All right. Welcome to the Democratic candidates for Pima County Attorney, a debate presented by the Democratic Club of the Santa Rita area with support from the Democratic Club of Quail Creek. During the pandemic, both DCSRA and DCQC continue to work for you. The DCSRA headquarters is opened and operating in a safe manner. The DCSRA board meets using Zoom programs like this one, and Wednesday open discussion meetings are held on Zoom. If you would like to become a member of DCSRA, visit our website, Democratic Club of the Santa Rita area.org, or you can contact us on Facebook at Santa Rita Dems. The website, Facebook, and the blast are important ways for the community to stay informed. If you live in Quail Creek, you can find DCQC online at dcqc.org. We also have Zoom meetings and presentations for the membership. Any contributions, small or large, are greatly appreciated and can be made on the website or at headquarters. If you would like to be a part of turning Arizona blue, visit us online or in person. This election is the most important in our lifetime. It is a battle for our democracy and the nation. We are here to support Democratic candidates. Today, we welcome two of the three candidates running for Pima County Attorney. Mark Debete will not be joining us today. However, Laura Conover and Jonathan Mosier are here. I am John Murphy. I will be the moderator for the debate. I am currently the president of DCQC, a retired science educator and research zoologist. The candidates will speak in alphabetical order by last name. The protocol will be 3 to 5 minute opening statements. A moderator will ask 10 to 12 questions. Each candidate will then have 1 minute to answer. If a candidate is referred to, then that candidate will have 1 minute to respond. We will then open the audience questions. Again, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. Audience questions are all taken through YouTube and relayed to the moderator. When the audience questions are completed, there will be a 2 minute closing statement by each candidate. So before we begin, I would like to ask the candidates to include in their opening statements a short summary of the duties of the county attorney. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Laura, and she's going to give us her opening statement.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. And a very special thank you to DCSRA and Quail Creek. And it's not just that I'm thanking you for giving up your afternoon on a Saturday to devote a discussion to criminal justice reform. I am thanking you for being students and advocates of criminal justice reform for a very long time. And I know this because I was with you in the winter of 2015, 2016, when you packed that room on the second floor of the plaza. And you've devoted time to criminal justice reform and lectures and forums on criminal justice reform ever since. And I was with you 5 years ago because I am a lifetime criminal justice reformer. I have devoted my entire life and career to fighting for civil rights and due process and advocating for the most vulnerable populations in our community. I'm Laura Conover and I'm running for Pima County Attorney. And I'm gonna argue that it's one of the most important races on the ballot that's probably already at your home right now. Because 60% of the general fund goes to law and order. So this couldn't be more critical at a more critical moment in time, because true reform is more humane and more responsible to the taxpayer. We've been dealing with the war on drugs here since the 80s, because we are at the end of a 40-year administration that is sunsetting with the retirement of Barbara Lawal. And while there were innovative programs at the beginning, we've become trapped in a criminal justice system that is still fighting that war on drugs, that tells the voters that I'm the county attorney and I'm working so hard for you by breaking the record every single year, including last year, on felony filings, the most ever recorded in Pima County Superior Court history. And the highest percentage of that, nearly a third, for simple drug possession or even just drug paraphernalia. We've known for so long that we cannot continue to prosecute our way out of drug addiction or mental illness. And the question in front of us now is simply this: do we continue on with the status quo, with the office that chose its next successor as they did in 1996? Or do we embrace, for the first time in 40 years, a candidate from outside the office, a highly skilled, high integrity attorney manager who can come in from outside the office and reframe that $40 million budget in a way that is more humane and more responsible to the taxpayer? I am a lifetime Democrat, and it's not just that I'm the candidate that has always been registered a Democrat. It's that I've always been here with you since the 90s, fighting for candidates and causes so important to us. And we can tell that because of the broad coalition that supports not only me, but supports reform. You can see it in Nina Trasoff, who is my campaign chair, who I campaigned for when she was about to become our vice mayor and is now my campaign chair. You can see it in Congressman Grijalva and the late Richard Elias and Sharon Bronson. So you can see it in the Board of Supervisors. You can see it at the city level with our mayor, Regina Romero, our vice mayor, Paul Cunningham, and city councilwoman, Nikki Lee. You can see it that the community is so ready for this when the Tucson Metro Chamber decides the reform candidate is the one we're going to back, because we're finally ready to stop felonizing all of our hard workers and our skilled laborers, because it's not good for our economy. You can see it far and wide with Planned Parenthood and the Sierra Club choosing the candidate who they know will protect our most precious resource, our Sonoran, beautiful Sonoran desert. I'm asking you to join me. I want to inspire you to finally choose this moment in time when we can have true, real reform. I am with you. Stand with me. Ask me your tough questions. I'm ready for them. Let's go. I'm excited for a great debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Jonathan, you're on.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. My name's Jonathan Mosier, and I'm running for Pima County Attorney. And the question that you'll be deciding when you get your ballot, hopefully you already have it, the question you'll be deciding is absolutely not whether there will be change and reform, because that's a given. The question, and it's an exciting one that you get to decide, is who is best situated to bring you the change and the reform that we need while protecting community safety and victim rights. Because there was an important question posed at the beginning of the opening statements, and that is, what does the county attorney do? The county attorney is our lead prosecutor. And one of the most important things we do at the county attorney's office is protect this community from things like child molestation, fatal child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, impaired drivers, murder. You know, we really do important work, whether it's burglary, car theft. We keep the community safe and we advocate for victim rights. That's a big part of what the lead prosecutor does. So you're not just voting for somebody who is going to change the system. We're going to talk about change at length, I hope. But you're also voting for somebody who is going to effectively protect the community and protect victim rights. Now, there's another component to what the county attorney does, and that is that the county attorney advises the sheriff, county departments, the board of supervisors. And when I say advise, I mean that the county attorney is the lawyer. I do not mean that the county attorney is an elected party politician who sets the policy for Pima County. If somebody wants to do that, they've got to run for that type of a job. This is an attorney job. And what we do is we advise county departments, sheriff, and I would love to talk about that legal advisor role very specifically during this debate. So who am I? I'm a lifelong prosecutor. I have wanted to prosecute since I was a kid, and I myself was bullied. In junior high school, I was a skinny little debate nerd, and I got picked on. I wanted to fight back against the bully, but I knew I couldn't win. At the same time, I was involved in debate, and I started to read about horrible things people do to one another, like murder and rape. I dreamed of fighting the real bullies in the courtroom. And that's what I've been doing for the past 15 years, taking on some of the scariest, highest profile, most important cases in our community, winning cases against people like David Watson, who killed 3 women and got away with it for 15 years. But more importantly, years ago, being promoted into positions of management and leadership, training all of our felony prosecutors, and then managing the entire criminal division. So I am a tested prosecutor and prosecution leader. I've been invited to speak about ethics for prosecutors for years, not just in Arizona, but nationally. So I'm ready to lead the criminal division on day one. I'm also the only candidate for this office with significant and major civil legal experience. So I'm ready to act in that legal advisor role. But now let's talk for a second about reform. I am a committed reformer. And when I say that, I've been working within a system that I see needs dramatic change. And I've proposed the most specific reform platform. Why do I say that? Well, because the Arizona Daily Star editorial board took a look at all the candidates, interviewed them at length publicly. Unlike some of the other endorsements that have been mentioned, this was a public interview process inviting participation by the public. And the Daily Star said, not only do I have the most specific and detailed plan for reform, but I've got the steady hand to implement it. So look, we're not going to be prosecuting adults for personal possession of marijuana. We're going to drastically expand drug treatment alternatives to prison. We'll stop seeking the death penalty. We'll expand restorative justice approaches like the community justice boards that work so well in the juvenile setting, and many other changes I look forward to talking about today. But make sure when you check that ballot box that you remember not to take for granted the fact that we also need to protect community safety and victim rights and provide solid legal advice to elected political members of the Board of Supervisors as well as county departments. And you need a steady hand who can accomplish all of that with the experience to get the job done. That's me. I look forward to our discussion. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So Laura, we're going to go to you. And the first question is, how does your background and experience make you more suitable for being county attorney than your opponents?
Thank you, John. I want to make a very clear distinction. I've spent my entire career fighting for civil rights and due process and criminal justice reform. It's known community-wide. And 2 years ago, the judges on the federal bench appointed me to represent nearly 400 contract attorneys. So I feel like I have more management experience than both of my opponents combined. We need to be very clear about comparing the two records. My opponent is talking about reform, and he wrote about reform on his website. But just last year, he was, as he just said, managing the entire criminal division, under which he continued to ask for cash bail to keep people in jail for only tiny bonds. He continued to break the record at an all-time level of simple drug possession filings, and he was prosecuting a death penalty case himself. So we need to look at what we've done, not just what we say.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, you want to answer the same question and handle any rebuttals?
What was the question?
The question is, how does your background and experience make you more suitable for Pima County attorney than your opponents?
So what I'd like to do is have a minute to answer that, and then I would request a minute in rebuttal so that I can address the multiple points that were raised specifically about me.
Okay.
Thank you. So in terms of my own management experience and qualifications for the office, I think it boils down to a story I like to tell. 10 months ago, I was sitting around a table at the county attorney's office with all of the supervisors, bureau chiefs, the county attorney, and the chief deputy county attorney, all the leadership of the office. And at that time, I saw a problem. Our attorneys were drowning in cases involving personal possession of narcotic drugs, small amounts of drugs. And I spoke up strongly and said we needed to stop charging so many of those cases. Treatment alternatives work better. We can't simply be continuing to churn these type of cases. That approach was rejected. The reason it was rejected is because the county attorney sets the policy for the office, not the chief criminal deputy. Of course, if the chief criminal deputy sets the policy, then we won't be able to change policies if we're elected county attorney. The county attorney sets the policy. So as chief criminal deputy, my views were rejected. When the pandemic hit, they were adopted, and the jail population was reduced by 30% based on a suggestion I had made 10 months before. Nearly every bureau chief and supervisor in that room has endorsed my candidacy because they believe in my vision for change. Now, responding to a few of the attacks on me that were made, first of all, I don't get to choose whether we seek the death penalty unless and until I'm elected county attorney. And if elected, I certainly won't seek it. Now, the case that's being referred to is the serial child killer of Isabel Celis and Maribel Gonzalez. And yes, I did put that case together, and yes, I did handle that case. And it's going to take a steady hand and leadership to make sure we do the right thing on cases like that. It would be really hard to do that work if your first day studying how to be a prosecutor is your first day as lead county attorney, lead prosecutor. And then finally, I would say that the proof of my reform platform is in the details, which are set forth online. And it's a platform that's been endorsed by a wide variety of community leaders. Please look at it at mosier2020.com. Thank you.
Okay.
John, would it work to have 1 minute of rebuttal there as well?
Sure, go
Just
ahead.
as a point of procedure, I did not mention my opponent.
Yes, I know. But I told Laura that I'd give her the same opportunity, so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we need to talk about two things. We need to talk about the courage of leadership. If you don't agree with who's running the office and you have strong moral objections, you have to have the strength of character and the courage to stand up to that. there are high integrity attorneys, homicide prosecutors in that office who have told Ms. Lawal, to her credit, that they can't and won't prosecute death penalty cases. My opponent was not one of those. He was willing to prosecute death penalty cases. And it's a really critical distinction about what we can rely on when someone's actually elected to office. And I want to draw a logical distinction as well and just say this. Look, if my opponent really was fighting Ms. Lawal so much, it is curious that she handpicked him, endorsed him, campaigns for him, and gave her entire campaign staff. It's a question. It's a question we should ask.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. And try to be as specific as you can. So what are your reform plans specifically for the county attorney's office?
I think, does Mr. Mosher get to go first this time?
No, you go first.
Oh, should I? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry,
Yes.
Sean. And we can trade back and forth if that's the preference of
Okay. Mhm.
opponent. I want this to be fair. I have very specific plans. I cannot abide cash bail anymore. It's the hallmark of my platform, and I've been fighting it for so long. Tiny little cash bonds that trap people in jail merely for no other reason than they can't pay that bond. It's been a terrible scourge, and it's caused racial disparities, and I've been fighting it for years. And I think that's how I came to get the endorsement of John Legend and the Bail Project. I'm going to go down to the Mission, a section of the jail every night for as long as it takes to teach prosecutors how to argue conditions of release that keep the community safe, but keep people at home and on the job, because we need people with their families and we need them working through the process. We're going to deflect on simple drug possession instead of jailing. We're not going to break the record on felonies, and I'm going to have a fraud unit. I'm the only one talking about a fraud unit, and that's a minute.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
All right. So Jonathan, how about you? What are some specifics ways that you're going to reform the county attorney's office?
Yeah, and I'll mention that the specifics are all listed on my website. That is a distinction. You can look them up yourself. Take a look. Mosher 2020 reform. I will stop prosecuting adults for personal possession of marijuana. It's a waste of scarce resources. I'm not going to wait for the legislative change. I'm the first candidate to recognize there is a statutory outlet. We don't have to waste scarce resources on that. I'll increase treatment alternatives to prison dramatically. And by dramatically, I mean from a few hundred people to thousands of people that are going into treatment instead of headed towards prison. I'll stop the death penalty. We've already talked about that. I wasn't allowed to make that sort of change. And I believe in prosecuting and protecting my community so much. I just wasn't willing to quit and give up my life's passion. I'll expand community justice boards. Talked about that. What I mean is get them into schools so kids don't have to be arrested to get the benefit of that resource. I will decriminalize poverty, and our experienced prosecutors don't need to be taught how not to ask for money bond. The fact is there's a policy right now that prevents them from being able to do what they want to do. That's why they've endorsed my vision for the future. Thank you.
Okay.
John, can I do this for just a second? Something popped up into the chat box that says we've lost the YouTube feed. Should we pause and check?
George, are we okay? George, are we okay? George says we're okay.
Yes, you're okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. It came across the screen saying we lost YouTube.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
it's showing live on the top on my screen. So thank you for letting me know.
Okay, sorry.
All right. So let's see, I'm going to give this question to Jonathan first. Jonathan, what specific kinds of things can you do in the county attorney's office to sort of end the school to prison pipeline?
That's a great question. It dovetails with what I've been talking about too quickly in terms of community justice boards. So we've done some good work here in Pima County, and rightfully people should be proud of this, that we have decreased the number of kids in juvenile detention from 400 to around 40. So there is excellent work being done in that respect, but there's still more to do. And so when I say expand community justice boards, what I'm talking about these are almost all volunteers. They're just a couple of employees, so they don't take a lot of money, which we all know is in short supply. And what they do is they provide kids who are in trouble with an avenue to get back connected to their peers and their teachers in a positive way that's not punitive. So a kid who's into art might help paint murals instead of, being sent into detention or something like that. What I want to see is the expansion of that type of program into the school setting, so you don't need an arrest in order to get the benefit of this program. That's why I'm endorsed by so many educators. Take a look at my endorsements at Mosier2020.com. Thank you.
Okay. And Laura, what would you do to stop this school to prison pipeline?
Mr. Mosher is correct that we've made great gains on taking the juvenile detention population and shrinking it down, but at the same time, racial disparities went way up. That's a terrible, terrible problem that should have been addressed years ago. And it's not only that, we don't even want children in the system at all. I mean, that's the gold standard there. I'm working with active school board members already, Adelita Grijalva and Crystal Foster, to make sure that I'm fully educated on where we need to go. And in 2016, there was a beautiful commission of judges and lawyers that came together to create a book that each school would have to make sure that we were calling behavioral health technicians and school counselors instead of 911 to decrease the police coming into schools. The Pima County Attorney's Office walked away from that commission and it died on the vine. Not under my watch. We're just going to have a new day going forward. Thanks.
Okay. So school districts, and I'm not that familiar with Pima County school districts, but school districts oftentimes have alternative schools for kids that have serious behavioral issues and learning issues. And those kinds of schools are usually better prepared to deal with those kids because the teachers and the administrators have better skills in terms of dealing with problem kids. Do you work with those particular kinds of schools in Pima County? I mean, are there schools like that in Pima County?
And I think this is my turn, John. This has not come up yet in the debate, but I sit on the board of Edge High School. It's an extraordinary program that was designed by one of my mentors, Greg Hart, the founder of Adult Education for all of Pima Community, and then later Pima County, and then later Pima College, near and dear to all of our hearts. And so I sit on the board of Edge High School, which he also founded in his spare time, which is a credit recovery program. It literally says we will take any child out of prison after pregnancy, after delinquency, after being thrown out by other districts. They're extraordinary. So that couldn't be more on my radar. I work with those kids now. I cheer on the Edge High School basketball team. You're going to have a real juvenile justice warrior in my administration.
Okay. Jonathan, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we figure out why it is that we would not want police and prosecutors having close connections with all schools and school administrators. And there are some really good reasons why we've worked against ourselves in that respect. What I mean by that is that currently school administrators, teachers, they know that if the police or prosecutors are involved, that can be a very dark road to go down. And nobody wants us walking down that school prison to pipeline unnecessarily. That is exactly why I'm proposing an approach where we're involved when a kid gets in trouble and they're being sentenced to or sent to things like the alternative to suspension program. We've got to be aware of the fact that's really no programming at all because of the disastrous underfunding of education in Arizona. And so that's where the CJB type programming would come in, so that we could give something to kids who are starting to get into trouble instead of just separating them from their peers and their teachers. That's exactly the type of program I'm talking about. Yes, absolutely. We will fight against the school to prison pipeline, and we'll work with kids who have difficulties learning, behavior trouble, whatever it takes.
Okay. So as the county attorney, Laura, is there, what can you do about a problem that I have only recently come to realize exists, and that is illegal gun sales on the Pima County fairgrounds? I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but my guess is you are.
I am.
Okay. What can you do about it?
So it's a huge legal conundrum right now, John, because the city was able to get rid of the gun show loophole at the Tucson Convention Center. So then it begged the question, well, why can't the county get rid of it at the Pima County Fairgrounds? There's a Pima County Fair Commission, and that's a body, and kind of a legal entity in the middle of that question. And the Pima County Attorney's Office has advised the Board of Supervisors that there's nothing that can be done to fix that. I think there's always an answer. So we're definitely going to be reopening that. Is it a simple contractual answer? Renegotiating the contract. If you want to continue to have the fairgrounds on Pima County land, we're not going to be selling guns under the gun show loophole. You just don't give up. You don't give up on an answer like that.
Okay. Jonathan, what do you have to say about that?
Well, this is one area where, again, we agree it's who's the best person to deliver what we need done. And absolutely, positively, I admire what the city has been able to accomplish. We cannot be having gun shows at the county fairgrounds where there are not background checks. One issue there, which any civil attorney with experience would understand quite well, is the advice that should be given to the board in terms of liability and potential risks. And I don't want to hear about insurance coverage, because you're also talking about premiums and costs to the county that are hidden. So look, we are going to find a way to do what the city has, in my opinion, bravely done, which is to say we are simply going to, at every step, challenge this, what I consider to be a ridiculous Arizona Supreme Court opinion that somehow, we couldn't possibly have any program that impacted negatively upon a gun. That just can't be the right state of the law. And I'll fight that all the way to the Arizona Supreme Court and the US Supreme Court if I have to. So yeah, I don't believe in gun shows without background checks occurring on Pima County property, and the Fair Commission ought to prevent that. And if they won't, we ought to be advising the board that that's the wrong way to go. Now, one thing to point out is that the county attorney doesn't just snap their fingers and make that policy. That is going to have to be a decision of the Board of Supervisors. But as the legal advisor, we can put forth the best legal advice possible. I would like to take another look at that issue.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question for Laura, what would you do about elder abuse, especially financial abuse of the elderly by family members and friends?
John, when I first realized that I was suddenly out of nowhere going to hibernate my law practice and put my whole life aside and run for Pima County Attorney, I thought I was going to have a chance to spend time with people all over this massive, beautiful county, not knowing the pandemic would hit. I started in Green Valley and Quail Creek, and I spent a lot of time there over the holiday period. And all I heard, I was campaigning on my platform which was that we must reframe this budget. We must stop dumping and losing and draining our money away in this $40 million budget on simple drug possession. We got to reframe the priorities, and we have to have a fraud unit for the first time in 20 years to go after fraud and scam. And spending time in Green Valley showed me that the problem is rampant. And it's a kind of elder abuse that makes my blood boil. It's not that I'm just planning to build a fraud unit, it's that it will happen. My mentor from many, many years ago at the law school, Jack Chin, is re-upping his Arizona bar license because he ran white collar clinics here. And he's going to come back on sabbatical and help me open the first fraud unit in 20 years. It couldn't be more important to me.
Okay. And then we'll go to Jonathan. And how do you feel about handling this kind of situation?
I feel it's very important, and I do want to correct the record in a couple of respects. So the county attorney's office actually prosecutes literally hundreds of fraud schemes every single year. So there's not a unit entitled the homicide unit. There's not a unit entitled the carjacking unit, and that doesn't mean we don't handle homicides and carjackings. So we handle frauds, including against the elderly. One thing I want to point out, because I was surprised when this was part of a platform early on, it seemed not to recognize some jurisdictional issues. The Attorney General's office has sole jurisdiction over consumer fraud. So we just don't get to do consumer fraud. And then a lot, sadly, of the fraud scams cross state lines and even national lines. And those are expressly and solely the jurisdiction of the US Attorney's Office. I have great working relationships with both of those offices. The task force against senior abuse is run out of the Attorney General's office. We will have the expertise. We'll continue to have people doing that work in our office. And it's absolutely critical we protect the elderly, not only from financial abuse, but from physical abuse, which we do an exemplary job of. And I look forward to continuing that work. Thank you.
Okay.
John, my platform was described. Could I have a minute rebuttal, please?
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to start my clock. So we're talking to someone about someone's platform who was a Fed for 8 full years under the Obama administration. I was a federal defender because I'm bilingual. So I was there from 08 to 16. So yes, the strong connections are there. Here's the difference. It's really important to look at those 7,000 felony filings that were filed last year. It's on my website. I think it's under facts or facts matter, because it's like less than 2% could be considered fraud because there's no fraud unit. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office has a robust fraud unit. And yes, sometimes they do the work with their resources and lawyers, and then it's filed in federal court or it's filed by the Attorney General's office. That's no reason to give up on fraud and scam. It's to just say someone else will take care of it. And I think that's why it's frankly become so rampant here. It's just not under my watch. We're going to have a local number, we're going to have local reporting, and we're going to have local help. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to give Jonathan the next question here. The phrases law and order and defund the police have taken on negative connotations in various parts of society with people of various political persuasions. And how do you go about balancing these with people who take extremist views?
This is such an interesting issue. It really relates to some figures I heard that 60 or maybe even over 70% of Arizonans both believe Black Lives Matter, of course, and they also believe in supporting law enforcement. So what do we take of that? What I take from that is that you need a steady hand at the county attorney's office, not a party politician. And it's somebody who can build bridges, not deepen divides. So if you look at my tripartisan support, it really is interesting to consider the fact that I've united independents, Democrats, Republicans around the most detailed and specific criminal justice reform platform, look at my website, mosier2020.com, look at the reform platform, and then consider the fact that people are saying I have Republican support. It's really quite amazing. I will build bridges to get the job done. We agree on more than people think, more than is being expressed, and we can improve the criminal justice system and make it one we all can be proud of with a steady hand running the county attorney's office.
Okay. Laura, do you want to follow up on anything there?
Yeah, is it okay if I take the question as well?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, great, perfect. We are in extraordinary times. There's absolutely no doubt. And that's why we need a strong, present, ever active, ever accessible, ever available community leader and a really good communicator. We need someone that explains that defund the police means to bring medical professionals in to respond to medical crises, just as my brother does in his work that he in the mental health unit that he founded here for our community. We need someone who can push modernizing the police. We need someone who can take her endorsement by the Sheriff's Deputies Association and her endorsement by Mass Liberation and Lucha and literally bring people together at the same table. This is the kind of community leader we need right now more than ever. And it's not just that, it's also someone who understands that when we restore the general fund, it comes at a time to give small business recovery. I mean, pandemic and trauma in the streets, this is the time to bring in a Tucsonan for true leadership. Thank you.
Okay. And Laura, I'm going to just give you this question and we'll go back to Jonathan to follow up on it. As of yesterday, when I checked, Pima County has had 11,000 plus cases of COVID-19 and about 300 deaths. Elected officials that have promoted no masks, opening bars and restaurants, and other actions that have caused the spread of the virus, I think are culpable and for all of the mortality and morbidity. And would the Pima County attorney consider prosecuting those people for their actions?
This is a tough question, and I can tell you what I've been doing is I monitor it every morning. We passed 2,000 deaths statewide yesterday, and I monitor it because I'm still the manager for those nearly 400 attorneys in federal court, where I worked across the aisle, even with the Republican appointee, the federal prosecutor, because he's my counterpart. And together we moved 1,800 nonviolent migrants out of custody before the virus hit, knowing that it would be like a tinderbox in those jails. That's the leadership you need. So you need the strong leadership for preventative behavior and preventative actions. But you also have to be a strong leader to make unpopular decisions at times, which is basically the hallmark of my entire career, fighting for the Constitution. And if the endangerment statute is necessary, if people are recklessly endangering lives, that's what the endangerment statute is for. And this is going to take incredibly strong, courageous leadership.
Okay. So Jonathan.
I just got a message I had been muted. Sorry about that.
No, you're okay. I hit the wrong button.
So,
yes,
you know, I think it's interesting. Let's take one step back and remember that we're talking about, when we talk about reform, one of the main issues we're all concerned with is mass incarceration, over prosecution, the use of prosecution resources indiscriminately. And, you know, one of the things that happens is every time there's something that's very upsetting, a child is murdered. And so we end up with laws that are extremely draconian for anybody who does anything to a child, which is probably appropriate, right? I've spent a lot of time enforcing laws like that to protect children, prosecuting cases like that. But what we don't want to do is end up, because we are all extremely horrified by political decisions being made around the pandemic, we don't want to try to criminalize politicians. I think that probably would not be a good solution here. Certainly, if somebody is themselves recklessly exposing another person to the virus, that is something where we can and will look at prosecution. I'm somebody who has leaned forward in prosecuting cases involving reckless driving and deaths due to reckless handling of weapons. The Jenna Iop case was charged after years of it sitting uncharged because of me taking a look at it. So I will definitely lean forward on recklessness that results in illness and death. But at the same time, I would just pose a cautionary note that we don't want to try to criminalize our political divisions. That's probably not going to be the solution to this crisis. Wear a mask. Stay in if you can, please.
Okay. What I was trying to get at here was that politicians are actually encouraging people by not carrying out or carrying through on rules that come from the county level or the state level. And they end up confusing people to the point where people don't know what the rules are. Wear masks, don't wear a mask. It seems like it's up to the individual. And considering the way the COVID virus is spread through the state, it just seems to me that it would be the only way we're going to flatten the curve and bring the number of cases down is social distancing, wearing masks, and closing down everything except essential businesses. And I just don't see Arizona politicians doing that. And it may be because they have certain political views, but public health should override those, in my opinion.
You're not going to hear any disagreement from me, John.
Okay.
I don't think we should attempt to, as much as we all might want to, I don't think we should attempt to, incarcerate the political party with whom we're opposed. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. We got to wear masks. We need clear direction from public health leaders like Chairman Ramon Valadez of the Board of Supervisors, who I'm proud to have his endorsement.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to Laura. And Laura, this question of enforcing the law and at the same time dealing with systemic racism in the justice system. What are some ways that this can be solved?
And John, that's 1 minute.
You can take
So let me
two
try-
if you need it. We have
Let
time.
me try to answer that in 1 minute. In 2003, when I arrived in Pima County Superior Court, the county attorney's office said, we have a real problem. This group of prosecutors is not at all diverse and does not reflect our community. In 2020, my opponents are still saying that we have a real problem here. This group of prosecutors does not reflect our community. 17 years. I can't wait anymore. I'm going to diversify with my hiring and recruiting. I want people who grew up in these neighborhoods. It needs to be more bilingual. Why is it that every government job I had to prove I was bilingual before I could even interview for the job? Should not our prosecutors sufficiently, enough of them speak Spanish for that 18-year-old Spanish-speaking victim trying to describe a sexual assault to her prosecutor, the prosecutor that's prosecuting the case? The data shows when you diversify that group, then eventually you get reductions in racial disparities in the jail. Eliminating cash bail will help. Opening up probation instead of prison mandatory sentences and the draconian policies in play right now. I could go on. I'm out of time. Yes, it's a huge problem.
Okay. And I'm
1
going to
minute.
turn to Jonathan and see what he has to say about this.
I'll try to resist the urge to talk fast because I do have a lot to say about this. First of all, we've got to get away from a money bond situation. People should be in jail only if they present a risk to community safety. Why was Ted Bundy able to post a bond, get out, and kill again? It's ridiculous that it would be based on money that someone's held in jail. That also has disproportionate racial ethnic effects. Same with our failed hypocritical marijuana policy, which I will end, and I've been talking about since the day I announced my candidacy. So that war against marijuana has, frankly, overtly racist roots, in my opinion, and we'll get away with that, and that'll help the numbers. But let me say this, I'm not going to wait for policies like that to accomplish what we need. What we need here in Tucson is as the African-American population in the jail not to be 3 times the population in our community. And I will assign a prosecutor to go through those cases individually until there are not disproportionate impacts. And we will then move on to other minority groups. That's critical to win back public trust and confidence that we have a system we can all be proud of. I'll take dramatic steps like that. By the way, I recruited and hired a bilingual law student to become a prosecutor in our office, and we will encourage and promote diversity. One problem we have, which you might not know if you've never worked in our office, is that a lot of diverse prosecutors are then hired by the U.S. Attorney's Office because they pay 40% more money. We probably can't do that, but I will be able to give our newer and intermediate prosecutors a little bit more money without asking for more from the Board of Supervisors. In order to promote diversity, we've got to be able to pay people commensurate with what they can earn elsewhere, or as much as we possibly can. Look, people love working in our office. We will be able to retain people as long as we pay our beginning attorneys something that'll encourage them to stay.
Okay. I'm going to go to Laura. And Laura, in terms of the county's role in immigration, because we have such a large border shared with Mexico, what roles can the county play in helping develop an immigration policy so that we're not detaining children and separating them from their parents and having people die out in the middle of the desert trying to reach someplace when they get lost? What kinds of things can we do to change this immigration problem?
I think it's critical having a leader who's worked in immigration and criminal and immigration and the intersection. It's critical having a leader like me with that background, who's bilingual, who's worked with migrants and their families for, I don't know, since the 90s. To have that understanding that you then impart on your prosecutors. This county attorney's office continued to allow people to get deported, even legal permanent residents to get deported by refusing to eliminate paraphernalia off of plea agreements. Not under my watch. I'm not going to be in the business of separating families unnecessarily. Matt Green has already agreed, and for those of you who don't know, he's a local regional immigration expert. He's going to come in for biannual trainings for the prosecutors in the office to make sure that they don't get anyone accidentally deported, so that they understand the immigration consequences, so that we are all working to keep families together so we get just outcomes, not vengeful or exaggerated deportation outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I'll go to Jonathan and.
So first of all, I do think it's important just to make sure everyone understands the county attorney's office does not prosecute immigration matters. And the reason I say that is because I wouldn't work someplace that did. I do not support our failed immigration policies, and the county attorney's office has nothing to do with them. That being said, we can still impact immigration issues in a couple of ways. First, I'm not just going to have a couple trainings a year. And the reason is because immigration law is tough and our prosecutors don't necessarily know it. So I want an in-house immigration specialist who will advise our prosecutors so that they never do something in a plea that has an unintended consequence of deportation. Let me tell you a little story about how strongly I believe in that. I became aware when I was chief criminal deputy of a young man, 18 years old. He was going to miss his high school graduation and get deported because he had a little bit of marijuana. And his lawyer was actually a recognized immigration expert, but failed to understand that we would waive all fees and get that kid into diversion and make sure that he would not get deported. I convened a meeting and made sure that happened so that that kid remains in the United States, where his family is, where he grew up. I simply won't allow consequences like that from plea agreements that are so unfair. That ends on my watch. The other thing that people should know, because the question was about how can the county attorney affect immigration and people dying in the desert, please understand, on the civil side, we can do wonderful things, and we have done some. Humane Borders put stations out in the desert so people don't die due to a lack of water if they can make it to one of these stations. Right. And our civil division, papered the deal, meaning they do the legal paperwork to make that happen. So maybe it's not, public and high profile work, but behind the scenes, isn't it really nice to know that that's happening out of our office?
Sure. So let me just ask you to explain the word, when you talk about diversion, what exactly do you mean by that?
Is that for me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yes. Diversion is so important. What diversion is, it happens in all kinds of different contexts. And forgive me, I've thrown that term around, and it is a technical term in my business. Diversion means instead of having a criminal case winding its way through the system with all of the costs and labor that are associated with a case moving through the system, instead, we basically put a pause on the case and we say, we're not going to deal with this case if you take this class, or if you complete this counseling, or whatever the requirements of diversion may be. In drug treatment programs, the diversion requirement is often that you attend either inpatient or outpatient substance abuse counseling as required by a screening evaluation. So that's what diversion is.
Okay, thank you. Laura, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, it might be helpful because it's a distinction, I think, between us. 2 years ago, the Tucson Police Department started deflecting, and that is not diversion. That is straight to Kodak on-demand treatment, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It allows police officers to ask the simple question, am I dealing with someone struggling with a drug addiction right now? Or am I dealing with someone who's like a danger to society? And if it's a drug addiction, they don't go to jail. They go straight to Kodak on-demand treatment. And that is because no matter how hard we try, jail is unhealthy, unsafe, and traumatic, and it's no place to start treatment. We need, especially with first-time people who are first-time interacting with the justice system and with police, to go to treatment first, so they don't get a felony and they don't get a record, so that we stop cutting our labor force off at the knees. Diversion is an intensive court program for someone on their 4th or 5th time, and it's not working. And of course, we have lots of people, because we've been fighting the war on drugs for 20 years and just cycling people out of jail. So that's what diversion's for. Or if there's other criminal activity going on, and then the system clamps down with an intensive court program called diversion. So that's a pretty big distinction, probably, from the platforms.
So George, because the mention of my platform and some discrepancies, can I please address that for 1 minute?
Yeah, you're on.
Please.
Go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, that's actually not a distinction between our platforms at all. In fact, deflection is something I support. I'm endorsed by the Tucson Police Officers Association. So interestingly, I'm endorsed by the organization that does deflection. And my opponent is endorsed by the organization that does not, the Sheriff's Department. If I'm the legal advisor to the sheriff and the Board of Supervisors and the county administrator, of course I will be doing everything in my power to get them and all other law enforcement agencies in Pima County to use deflection, which is the ability of the officer not to make an arrest in the first place and instead take the person to treatment that they need right on the spot. So we all agree on that. That's not a distinction at all. The only distinction is I'm endorsed by the organization that does deflection. The thing about diversion, that was, it's, forgive me for saying this, but that's just not accurate. I don't understand what's being said. Diversion doesn't have to do with whether you're in trouble 4 or 5 times. It's not equated with an intensive program. Diversion can be as simple, literally, there are marijuana diversion programs where you take a class. Now, I'm not going to have any prosecution for marijuana, so I'm just using that as an example. Diversion has nothing to do with how many times you've been arrested. What it is it is a pause in the criminal proceedings, could be your first arrest or your 10th arrest. And then if you do what's required, and it could be any number of things, a class, counseling, then your case is dismissed if you successfully complete the diversion program. I'm the only candidate. I think the reason I'm talking about it more accurately and more specifically is because I am the only candidate who has helped design and build diversion programs. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I, John, could I just take maybe even just 30 seconds?
You're on.
That's a helpful clarification, Mr. Mosher, and I'm very glad you support deflection. And my concern has been that Tucson Police Department's deflecting and the sheriffs aren't, which is a horrifying disparity that the county attorney's office never should have allowed. Where on one side of Valencia you get treatment, and the other side of Valencia you get jail. And that's why I went after the Sheriff's Deputies Association endorsement so hard. And they endorsed not only me, but reform, because they want deflection, and thank goodness. So I don't want to dream and study the rest of my life criminal justice reform. I really want to bring it in. So it's good.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So, Laura, I'll start with you for this question. Let's suppose that you win the election and you find yourself in a position where you have to work with both Mark and Jonathan. How is that going to go?
That is a very specific question. They're both on a leave of absence, and I think they're going to have to make personal choices. So it's very hard for me to speak for them about what they want to do. I know Mr. Mosher announced at a debate once that I had a firing list, and he promised to publish the quote, the recording of that the next day, and it never showed up because, of course, I do not have a firing list. Of course I don't. And my reputation on that speaks for itself. I need supervisors who are going to go on an inspiration tour, quite frankly, to recruit and hire excited prosecutors who, after this culture we've had for a long time, are going to seek justice. They're not going to seek the win. We're not going to win at all costs. We're not going to have that attitude anymore. We are going to seek justice. And it's going to be a really exciting new day in that office. We're going to end the retention problem. We're going to increase morale. And it's exciting. It's such a wonderful time of potential. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to go to, whoops, wrong button. Can you hear me?
My turn?
Yeah, you're on.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I am not interested in the least in managing with any vindictive approach. So anybody who's qualified, skilled, and able to do the job is going to be considered for the job and hired, promoted, retained as appropriate. I am a big tent type of leader. In other words, I like big teams of great people doing good work. I think that's why I got, and I really find this pretty heartwarming. After being chief criminal deputy, I embarked on this campaign, and nearly every bureau chief and supervisor who report to me as their manager, essentially, what you might call their boss. I don't like that term, but I worked with them, and nearly every one of them endorsed me and my candidacy. And that's not because I represent the same old thing. That's because they've seen my vision for reform up close in meetings, in disagreements in the office, published on my website. And these folks are excited for the future. There isn't a problem of morale at the county attorney's office. Those of us who actually work there in management roles have all had this experience. Someone coming in and crying in your office, literally tears coming out because they have to leave because to make enough money to support their family, they've got to go take 20% more money in Pinal County as a prosecutor. In Florence, Arizona, they can get paid as much as 20% more money to leave Tucson. It makes no sense. I will, without seeking any money from the Board of Supervisors, find efficiencies in the office. I know where they are because I've been working there. I've been managing and leading the office. I have widespread support because people know on day one, I'll be able to come in and make a better office and address issues like that. I really look forward to it. And I mean, briefly, if I should address the point made previously, you can't have a plan to hire a bunch of new people. We've already heard about Jack Chin, a professor who I'm not aware of his fraud prosecution experience, but that's one of the plans. We've had other people mentioned to come in with Ms. Conover, and you can't hire all these new people if you're planning to keep our great prosecutors, our hardworking prosecutors who are currently there. So I've got a great team. I want to lead that team, and I look forward to change and reform as outlined at Mosier 2020.
Okay.
And John, so John, may I just briefly respond? And
Okay.
I'll start my clock. Thank you. You can go on a hiring spree when you have a $40 million budget, and the administrative line item on that budget is often larger than the entire civil division of lawyers in your office. And that's inevitable. Look, it's inevitable. After 40 years, you're going to have this entrenchment that builds up of administrative overhead that is opposite of running a lean and mean machine. So we are going, and the problem is the retention problem when they have to refill the felony trial unit every 2 years. So we are going to have the resources literally immediately available to go on a beautiful hiring spree and recruit young, talented attorneys who want to come in and fight for justice. It doesn't require firing anyone, which of course is why I don't have a firing list as he announced previously. It's going to be a really positive time going forward. And I think you can just feel this positive energy coming from me. It's going to be contagious. Thank you.
Let me ask you a quick question now, because I don't quite understand the salaries that get paid in the county attorney's office. Those are determined by who?
Well, in my budget, it's going to be determined by me, and I think that administrative line item, is just going to go away naturally because it's literally the administration that works with Miss Lowell, who's retiring, and that's what's going to free up so many resources, and then not writing millions of dollars of taxpayer check money for the death penalty anymore, not wasting it there, not wasting it on drug paraphernalia prosecutions when treatment's a third of the cost. So it's uncomfortable to look at that group of attorneys that are so low paid and to think why, and they don't get the same money that their colleagues get in other legal offices. I mean, it's just, it's terrible. And it has to be reframed. It has to be reworked, that $40 million budget. So there are going to be easy ways to raise morale quickly by both pay and by training.
Okay. And
George, you asked a follow-up there, and I don't know, am I going to get a minute on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the question was really a more limited one. You asked the follow-up question. You said, who sets the salaries? And very interestingly, the answer was, well, I will if I'm elected. And you see, there's actually policies, and in the county government, the county administrator, Mr. Huckleberry, must approve those salaries. So that's not actually accurate that as the county attorney, you just set whatever salaries you want. They have to be approved by the county administrator. who himself answers to the Board of Supervisors. So look, within salary ranges that are currently existing, we can bump people up by finding efficiencies within the office. I'm endorsed by the IT director, the office administrator, folks working throughout every staff and leadership position in that office. And again, it's not because I stand for the same old. They've watched the debates. They've seen the platform since October of last year. It's because of my vision for change. We will be more lean, but in order to get more lean, your first day on the job probably should not be your first day ever in the office and your first day ever as a prosecutor. That's not really the recipe to make the most effective changes the quickest.
Okay.
John, should I take a second to rebut that?
All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Correct. The county administrator does have some oversight, even though I will be an elected official, but it's not like the county administrator is going to decline raises when they're fiscally responsible. They're not going to decline moving administrative overhead money to the fighting soldiers, these young people who are keeping our community safe and sound. So of course that would be approved. But here's the bottom line. The fact that I haven't been prosecuting in that office is my strength, not my weakness. It's time after 40 years to bring an attorney in from outside the office to breathe fresh air into that building. That's the choice. Thank you.
So John, I don't know how much back and forth you'll allow, but I do want to address that point because it was directed at me.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we'll end it here though. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I just want to point out, 40-year administration to me seems a little meaningless. And the reason I say that is I haven't been prosecuting since I was 11, right? I'm 51 years old. I don't know about a 40-year administration. What I know about is what I want to do. And you can look at it at Mosier2020.com. That's what I'm pledged to in writing. That's why my endorsers have endorsed my campaign platform. It is what I stand for. And the people who know me, who have been working inside that office, know that it's consistent with the vision I have announced and fought for years. There is currently a county attorney, and she sets the policies somewhat differently than what I would choose. And I mean, you can interpret somewhat however you like, but just look at the policies. It's why the Arizona Daily Star endorsed my candidacy. They specifically said, I had the most detailed plan and the steady hand to deliver it on day one. Now, the thing about being a tested prosecutor is we are talking throughout this whole debate as though all that needs to happen is change, but we've got to make sure we continue to protect community safety and victim rights. And it'd be really hard to think about how you'd lead prosecutors in that work when you've never, ever studied prosecution until day one as lead prosecutor for Pima County. That would be an unusual way of going about effective change.
Okay. So my last question is, I'm going to ask Jonathan to ask Laura one question. I'm going to ask Laura to ask Jonathan one question. And you can just you can ask Laura a question something that you would like to know about, and Laura to ask a question of you that she would like to know about. So would you like to do that first?
Sure. So my question would be, first of all, just yes or no, and then a follow-up to it. So yes or no, have you ever prosecuted a single case? And if the answer is no, how do you plan to make decisions about what cases we do and don't charge when you're sitting in the room with a bunch of other experienced prosecutors and they disagree?
Okay, Laura.
John, this is a brilliant creative idea. Jonathan, thank you for your question. My brother entered the academy when I entered law school. And he likes to say that I know more about the real life of law enforcement than most prosecutors ever will. And that's the kind of training and life experience I can impart upon a new group and the next generation of prosecutors. Just think of that wisdom and life experience. Just think of the fact that in the last 5 years in my small practice that I founded, I became a legal victims representative. So unlike a prosecutor who does not represent victims, I literally was their attorney. And think about 5 years of working with victims and their families, and the level of communication and the delicacy of communication that I can impart and train on prosecutors. Think about the depth of the Constitution and due process and justice and not crossing the line. Think of what I can bring to that group of prosecutors to help change culture. And most of all, think about the hiring that I'm going to be able to make so that these prosecutors not only have supervisors, but mentors, high integrity, high quality career prosecutor mentors working inside the office for a new positive day going forward. It absolutely excites me. It's worked in other communities, and it's the reform that's going to come here now under my administration. Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay. So Laura, now it's your turn to ask Jonathan a question.
Just any question, right, John?
Yeah, keep it clean, I guess.
Right. He's told me so much already. It's the first time in the campaign I'm drawing a blank. Jonathan, how did you look? I grew up here and I love Tucson. How did you find Tucson? How did Tucson happen?
So great question. So I graduated from Iowa Law in '95. I think it was not. It might have been '94, and moved to Arizona. I wanted to live out west, and I came and clerked for the Arizona Supreme Court. And during that clerkship, I fell in love with the Sonoran Desert. I loved living in Phoenix. And I passed the Arizona bar back in 1995. And then I got a little distracted from my dream of being a prosecutor. I planned to stay in Arizona and be a prosecutor. But I took a job with a law firm and ended up kind of basically chasing money and living a life of, frankly, alcoholism, workaholism, addiction for many years at large law firms in Southern California. When I got sober, it kind of turned a light on in my life again. It's really like a moment of grace. I wouldn't be where I am without my sobriety. It's the most important thing. And I say that knowing that Heather is the most important, my wife, Heather, is the most important thing. But without my sobriety, I have nothing. And it gave me a new lease on life, and I was able to give up the money, the prestige of the big firm. I sold my house in the Hollywood Hills and moved to Tucson. I interviewed at many places, but I was looking for a place where I could make a difference quickly. And if you want to be a prosecutor and you have a bunch of experience, and at your interviews you say, hey, I want to prosecute murder, rape, a lot of offices will say, well, get in line, it's going to take years. And when I interviewed with Barbara LaWall, she said, well, I have the job for you. And I've never looked back. That's why I came to Tucson. It was the right place for me. I'm really glad I returned to the desert. And yeah, thanks. Great question.
Okay. So I think we're at the end, and I see that there's no questions from YouTube. So we will go to the wrap-up speeches. And I would encourage you to provide your website addresses for people who might be interested. I think both of you have over the course of the debate. But Laura, why don't you start with your ending presentation?
And John, we're going to keep this to 3 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, try to 3 to 5 minutes.
Well, that's a big difference, John. It's 4:30. Let's do 3 minutes, Mr.
Okay.
Mosher. 3 minutes.
I can commit to 3.
So I grew up in Tucson. This is the only home I've ever known. I was a baby and my mom was expecting my brother, so he gets to be the true native. And when I say 40-year administration, it's because Steve Neely and Barbara Lawal worked together. She was very quickly his second in command. And so I say that because this criminal justice system defines my entire life here. So it's not about Mr. Mosher and being 11 years old. It's that we've only had one system my entire life here. And it was born at the height and popularity of the war on drugs, which said that a strong, hardworking prosecutor could prove their merit to the public by convicting and jailing and imprisoning as many people as possible, without realizing how harmful that was going to be for our community, how impossible it would be when we felonized way too many people and marked them for life, branded them for life with a felony, and destabilized their employment for life, that it would leave us eventually less safe and unhealthy. That's why I am at this crossroads right now. I didn't know the retirement was coming. I didn't have the warning and planning. It just happened. It got announced. And suddenly I had to ask myself if I was this invested in this home that I love. Would I shut down my practice in November? Would I ask my family to put life on hold? Would I answer a lot of strange questions to my 6-year-old who is all about vote mama, vote Laura? And the answer was yes, and I don't regret it. It's been a hard road. The establishment is worried about change, and change is uncomfortable, but we are desperate for reform. The time is now. It can't come soon enough, and we're gonna do it responsibly and meaningfully, and we're gonna protect victims, and we're gonna go after fraud and scam, and we're gonna end up healthier than we were before. And I'm asking for your trust and your vote. And I'm asking you to tell all your friends and family, Laura Conover on their ballot box, lauraconover.com, Conover for County Attorney on Facebook. Be well, be healthy, be safe. And I hope to see you in person again soon. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you. So what I want to make sure everyone understands is that the county attorney, as the lead prosecutor and lead civil attorney, is charged with being the lead prosecutor, meaning protecting community safety and victim rights. And so while we talk about reform, because everyone agrees we need reform, there is no question you're going to get reform. Everyone can take a deep breath, because we know we're going to get much needed changes. Go to Mosher2020.com, reform, look at my reform platform. We will have change. But the thing is that protecting the community, I've heard it said by my opponent that protecting the community is the easy part. And that would be, I guess, easy to say if you've never prosecuted a case. It's very difficult to hear if your life's work is prosecuting the most difficult and heinous crimes that people will do to one another. You know, putting together the Isabel Celis case, that's the easy part. That's just not true. And the statement that every jurisdiction in the land does just a great job of protecting children in their communities and fighting domestic violence and fighting all forms of violence. Take a look at the George Floyd case. If I had been the lead prosecutor in that jurisdiction, you would have had a charge immediately. I've talked about that in detail. You can see my statements on my website under the news tab if you're interested. You need an experienced prosecutor to protect community and safety and victim rights while we make much needed reforms. But how do you know that I'll make the much needed reforms? You know, when I was chief criminal deputy, I brought in a man to speak at our office. His name was Michael Morton, and he had been in prison in Texas for over 20 years for murdering his wife, a crime he had not committed. Why would I have an exoneree come speak to us at the county attorney's office? And I invited defense lawyers because I believe in a collaborative approach. This is really a fresh and different perspective that I took, inviting an exoneree to come and talk to our lawyers. And I introduced him with the remarks that the most important thing we do is not obtain convictions. It is to not convict an innocent person. You know, when we talk about defending the Constitution, we defend the Constitution as prosecutors in quite a number of ways, because the Constitution includes victim rights in Arizona, and it also includes the rights of the accused that we must protect, and those are important as well. And you need your lead prosecutor to be somebody who can tell people how to put together cases in an ethical and appropriate manner and how to get the job done. You know, I ran into somebody on the street about 5 months ago, and I had made a promotion of somebody to misdemeanor supervisor. And the person I ran into was a criminal defense lawyer, and they stopped me and said, "Jonathan, that was such a great move. She was such a hidden gem." That's management. That's leadership. That's what I want to put into action. I know the players. I know the role. I know how to do the job and make the changes. Please visit Mosier2020.com. Look at the reform tab. Look at the endorsements. And please, when you fill out your ballot, check Jonathan Mosier for Pima County Attorney. I very much appreciate your time and attention. Everybody be safe, wear a mask, and it doesn't just apply to other people, it's all of us. Stay in if you can. You know, we'll get through this together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to end the debate here. I've been asked to remind people that Mark DeBolt was invited, but he was not able to attend today. And this debate will be available on YouTube. And again, thank you to DCSRA and DCQC for putting this on. All right, have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thanks,
Take care.
TC. Thanks, Quail Creek.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. George, are you there? George? Yes.
Thanks, John. You did a good job. We stumbled a little bit out of the gate, but we really flowed there. So some good questions.
Yeah, I was having a hard time at first getting that spotlight. It didn't seem to work right away. And then it took me a while to realize you were sending me all these messages.
Oh, yeah.
So you're reading those and kind of trying to listen to what was going on. It was a challenge. Take it easy.
All right. You too. Take care. Bye-bye. We'll talk
Bye-bye.
later.